All right, good morning, everyone. This is Anna Jankis, Marketing Coordinator at Core BTS, and welcome to today's webinar, Network Security Monitoring in Finance. We'd like to make this an interactive session this morning, so throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with us by typing in questions and comments using the question and answer pane in the WebEx Event Center. We'll be answering questions live during the event, and we'll leave time at the end to answer any questions as well. Today on our panel, we have Dan Eister, Core Consulting Engineer, and Matt Wilson, Core BTS Managing Consultant for the Security and Compliance Practice. And at this time, I'll pass it along to Matt to get us started.
Great. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, everyone, for jumping in today. We're targeting about, 35, 40 minutes of content, and as Anna said, we'll leave some time afterwards for any questions and answers. But please do, as we go along, fire some questions at us. Dan will be presenting, but Anna and I will be there to catch them, and it's a quick note that we can shoot back to you or something to bring up. We like to make this as conversational as possible. People attend way too many webinars with way too much PowerPoint, and what I've found to be best is if we can actually just have a conversation. Sure, we have some slides, but I'd rather not bludgeon you with some slides, at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, depending on what time zone you're in. I'd rather have a conversation and be specific to the topics or concerns that you have. So, sure, our topic is network security monitoring in finance or financials. Really, our goal and the idea behind this topic was that Core does overall across the company footprint work with a ton of financials, but specifically the security and compliance practice of which I'm a part of, that's really where our history is. 15, 20 years ago, when Core's practice was founded, it really was with local banks and credit unions, and it's grown and blossomed from there. But we still have that presence in the financials. We still do a ton in healthcare. We still, we've grown out to other verticals for sure, but that's the area where we probably do the most work, whether it's penetration testing or security assessment or just general consulting. And that's how this topic comes up is, we do the kind of typical security stuff, consulting stuff. And our customers, especially in financials, a lot of times they're focused on the audits and any findings that the auditors might have. And obviously that's critically important. You gotta stay compliant and you gotta respond to the auditor's issues. But when you get checkbox focused, you might be missing out on some other key aspects of your security program. So what we've recognized is a lot of our customers have different tool sets. You might have the security module in your ASA firewall that you've had for the last 10 or so years, but do you know what it's even doing for you? We've asked that question, and in a lot of client environments, especially financials, because the focus is on, we're a bank or we're a credit union or, we're a, some other kind of service provider or asset management company. Because that's the crux of your business, IT might not, and IT security might not get the investment. So it's just one of hundreds of tasks that the IT group's responsible for is to check the logs or look into this or do incident response. So we came up with this topic for the subject of this webinar because we wanted to share a little bit about kind of thinking about your network security monitoring program. We'll talk a little bit about some of the tool sets that are out there, and that's another point that I'd like to highlight is please share with us, what are you using or what are you curious about? We can't be experts in every single technology. We're a Cisco partner, but we get exposure to a lot of other kinds of things on the monitoring side. So, I'll now turn it over to Dan Eister, who is in our data center practice and has been implementing, whether it's on the firewall side or some of the newer features that you're seeing as some part of the next-gen firewalls. Route switch, he's well-founded. He's a network guy in his heart and a security guy because it's increasingly important part of just about anything we can do in IT overall. So I'll hand it over to Dan. Dan, thank you very much. And again, please keep the questions coming as we go.
All right, thanks, Matt. As Matt said, I'm Dan Eister. I am part of the Mid-Atlantic Region Data Center practice, consulting engineer, so I primarily focus on the implementation of Cisco security, route switch, and wireless products. But I do also now work with our account managers and SAs to provide security solutions for our clients. So overview of what we're going to talk about today. We'll go over some of today's network threats and examples. We'll dive into malware intelligence, and we'll talk about the differences between first and second generation solutions, and we'll go over layers of defense against network threats, and then at the end we'll go over a recommended action plan. A little bit of goal setting. So after today's conversation, we hope you have a better understanding of today's network threats and what can be done to prevent them. But we also must remember there's no silver bullet. There's nothing out there to fully protect you from every network threat that is out in the wild, wild west. So first we're going to start with the ways network threats can enter your network. Obviously email and web are always the big ones. Email through phishing, through files that you download, attachments that are PDFs that get open that have malware embedded into them. The web, going to, normal websites. I mean, I was at a client this week. Went to CNN.com, and there was an exploit kit got downloaded through private advertisement on that website. Now, USB sticks and drives. Some people might not think of that, but if you have when your employee says, I need to take this document home with me, they throw it on a USB stick, take it home, plug it into their home system, it's infected and they don't know, they bring that back to your place of work, plug it in, and there you go, you have malware come along. The other thing you sometimes hear is hackers will walk through a company's parking lot and drop USB sticks in hopes that people will pick them up and go, I wonder what's on this, and plug it into their laptop or their desktop, and there you go. There's another way threats can get on your network. There's always the concern of people bringing in their devices from home that aren't corporate, or you have contractors coming in. You don't know what kind of security they may or may not have on their devices, and you allow them on your network, and it's another way that the malware can get on your network. And also VPN tunnels, another one that a lot of people may not think of, site to site with a third-party vendor. You don't know what they have on their side. If their side's been compromised by an attack, is it possible that attack can traverse the tunnel to your network and compromise you?
And just to bring up, I mean, that's a good one that people don't often think of, and I'll cite until I die probably Target. Target, that was a step that the attackers took when they went after Target. It was through that Fazio Mechanical Services, the HVAC contractor, that had some kind of connection or connectivity into the Target environment. Now, whether the site people, I don't know. Those details may or may not be out there, but that's why it's such an important point. Like, everyone knows about, okay, we could get some malware, email, visit bad sites, sure. What's interesting today, I think, in 2015 is, years ago, even 5 years ago, if someone picked up something, of some malware, and it came in through their browser or through, just surfing, you could probably look at them honestly and say, you were in a place on the internet you shouldn't have been. You're looking at some content, it's certainly in a work context that you shouldn't be looking at. And you'd be mostly right. But it's changed. I mean, people, Dan, to your point, we've seen multiple examples of that, there's these ad networks that the attackers will take out some ad space on and slip in a Java vulnerability or a Flash vulnerability or whatever. So you can't just look at the end users and wag the finger in the same way that you could for sure 10 years ago and maybe even 5 years ago. But yeah, I'm sorry, Dan, I just wanted to interject that, you look at those ways that we see this stuff happening, and there's probably even one or two that we haven't even thought of yet that are actually occurring today. And I can't imagine what they are, obviously, but, this is very realistic. Think about your program for information security and your monitoring program. Would you catch things at this level, at each level here?
And the other one, obviously, is remote access VPNs, especially with split tunneling enabled. The home PC, or especially if they're using a home computer, it's not a corporate supplied device that they're doing a VPN access into your network. I always think back to many moons ago. That's how the Windows 98 code got compromised. There was a Microsoft employee or contractor that was promoted into Microsoft. Split tunneling was enabled. their machine was compromised. They got somehow across that remote access VPN and managed to get the code. So just some, review of how network threats can enter your network. And as I said, email and web are always the biggest ways that these threats can get into your network. So you need malware filtering or some sort of filtering on the edge for your email and for your internet. But again, even those, there's no silver bullet. I mean, we see it all the time with malware getting through with email and the web.
Yeah, and I'll just chip in from the when we do security assessments. Or even pen tests, a lot of times clients will say, well, we're good, we have whatever, insert your favorite vendor solution for email content filtering, whether it's a cloud-based solution or on-prem solution, whatever it is. And look, I'm not saying our phishing emails that we're so clever, we're going to sneak it by, just that from a mentality standpoint, you have to assume that it's going to get by it, right? So build your controls with the assumption that they'll fail, and as kind of defeating as that might feel, you have to take that approach because, yes, you need an internet content filter. Yes, you need an email filter to try to catch what it can. But it's also like just relying on antivirus alone on endpoints. You can't. You need this stuff layered. So that's not going away. Email and web are still going to be the two biggest that you see actually happening.
So some examples of today's network threats. I'm sure you're all familiar with Heartbleed and Cryptolocker. Cryptolocker is still very prevalent out there. We all know it comes in via web or email, it gets fired off, it gets executed, it starts encrypting your files, and panic ensues. Trying to get rid of it can be a nightmare. I mean, I've heard stories of some places they'll actually pay the ransom. Does work sometimes, doesn't work. Other times, you always hope you have a good backup to help, to help get that problem away. Usually you have to wipe the machine if you don't have, a tool to quarantine and get rid of that version of Cryptolocker. There's so many versions of them running around right now as well. And the other one I want to talk a little bit more in depth today about, and it leads into the next topic, is Rombertick. You may have not heard about it. Is extremely malicious of what it does to what it can do to your network and to your devices as well. So this leads us into the malware intelligence piece of this presentation and how malware has become increasingly more intelligent and sophisticated. But that also means the tools you use to defend against this have to be smarter as well. They have to be able to analyze the traffic in a different way than older products. So what I mean by malware intelligence is they have anti-analysis technologies built in. They have the ability to detect if they're being scanned by antivirus and anti-malware software. They will flood tracing tools. They'll start writing data to tracing tools in an attempt to fill up their logs and memory and just crash them. Now, sandboxing, as you may or may not know, is usually an environment that they'll take the malware in and try and run it to see what it's doing, to see is that executable, is it legitimate, is it bad, and some of these pieces of malware, like Rombertick, they'll stall out in the sandbox environment, and it won't know, is it doing it on purpose, did it crash, and it just won't have the ability to figure out what it's doing. And even some of them have the ability to actually crash the sandbox that it's running in, and that's another way that the malware can defeat these anti-analysis technologies. So a little bit more on Rombertick, how it works and what it does to evade, what it can do to evade and what it'll do to your system if it figures out it's being scanned. So area one is the anti-analysis. Obviously the first step is the person has to download the executable. And then that next step, as you can see, as I talked about before, it's going to try to flood any tracing tools that may be run against it. So the next thing it's going to do is check if it's been modified. If it is, it's going to cripple the system. And what that means is it'll actually wipe the master boot record on the system and restart it, and essentially rendering your system completely unusable. So if that happens, you hope you have a good backup of that system and you can recover your data and rebuild it. Now, there is malware persistence in, and we'll go through how this works. So after it goes through the anti-analysis, it unpacks itself, checks to see if the executable is where it wants to be. If not, it puts it there. Then it launches it, and then it'll decrypt itself, and then it'll launch itself again and overwrite. So it's constantly being sure that it's in the right location to run, and if it's not, it'll keep putting itself there. So if you think your anti-malware or antivirus software picked it up and you go, all right, I'm good, you reboot your computer, there's actually another copy on your desktop hidden somewhere, it's going to fire off again and you have it back. So it's just an endless cycle.
And we've seen this in multiple client instances where customers have given us a ring and had an incident, and we might have helped with some of the incident handling or management side of it. And, you run Malwarebytes or insert, again, your favorite antivirus tool, and you feel like you're cleaned up. But then, lo and behold, a day or a couple days, a week, whenever that box gets bounced, if it's a workstation, probably happens quicker. If it's a server, it could be some time, and it gets reintroduced. So I tend to err on the side of caution. I'm a risk-averse guy, and it means I take a scorched earth policy. If we have a known malware incident, a known incident, and we're confident, to me, the only way to be sure is to reinstall from known good media or from, now everything's virtualized. It's a bit easier to spin up a clean, protected VM. Now, clean, protected, what does that mean? It's going to mean different things in different environments, but hopefully you have, a base installation image or a snapshot from a certain date time on a known good backup. And we've even seen that with a handful of our financials. They're relying on some third-party IT services to do some what we would typically call like basic IT functions, things like backup or system maintenance. And in their head, they're thinking, well, one, that third-party IT group should catch it, and two, they're doing well with the backups. Well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but it's questions that need to be asked. So if that scenario somewhat describes your situation and what you encounter in your environment where third parties are involved, make sure you have a really good understanding of what services those third parties are providing, what SLAs you might have. Make sure you do some dry runs of things like an incident or a backup failure. I know that's going to be top of mind, again, from the audit respect, backup and recovery, business continuity. Auditors have been asking about that for 25 plus years probably. But as the tool sets change and how you're doing backup, you might be moving from tape to disk. When was the last time you tested that out? Because we've, again, had a number of customers go to actually recover, and it turns out, well, this particular system wasn't actually included in the full backup, or the snapshots weren't taken, or they're 2 weeks old, and that really harms our business. So, you don't know until you know, and you don't want to find that out when you actually have a real incident. You'd rather find it out by you asking the questions or running through some, demo scenarios. But, Dan's focused on RoberTick for a little bit here, but, Cryptolocker and the other kinds of ransomware have been huge as well. As I know the previous slide mentioned it. That's something we're probably seeing just as not, if not more of. So, don't get too malware focused on how are we going to tackle this particular problem. More think of how your controls are layered to give you a shot, and that goes all the way down to your backup and recovery processes. And
all right, so continue on here with the RoberTick example. Excuse me. When you look at the malicious behavior after it's gone through steps 1 and 2 to get around the anti-analysis and be sure it's persistent, it's goes through its malicious behavior. So everything's unpacked. It's going to compute its hash file. Now, if those hash files don't match, it's going to encrypt and wipe your data on whichever device is running on, which is, again, you hope you have good backups like Matt said. If those hashes match, it's going to execute itself and start sending data out. It's going to exfiltrate data. So just an example of one of the really nasty pieces of malware out there, how it can evade, first-gen technology, and probably even some of the second-gen technology out there, depending on how it looks at this piece of malware. So on that note, kind of a review of what first-gen technologies would be. They're point-in-time solutions. So if they don't see the attack coming through, if it's a dynamic attack, if it's not something they have a signature on, they're not really going to pick it up. And if that traffic's hidden, in a PDF or a flash file or something, it's just never going to pick it up. And like I said, they rely heavily on signature updates. There's a higher rate of false positives with these. And if attack comes through, if there's a signature match, they'll stop it, depending on how you have it configured. Like Matt said, the IPS module in the ASAs, in the first-gen ASAs, that's an example of first-gen technology. If it had a signature for it, it would stop the attack. However, if that signature was for an IIS attack, but you had a Linux server that was the target, here's a flag on something that isn't really true. It's a false positive. You have to go, you have to investigate it. Then you have to decide, do I tweak that rule to say, okay, well, these IP addresses, if it comes in, it's not really a true attack. I don't need to know about it. And then there's also manual intervention needed after an attack. You have to go through and figure out what's been compromised and how what your policy is to clean that up. So next-gen technologies, they have the ability to dynamically analyze traffic. They can see, deeper into what's going on your network, and they're not solely based on signatures. They have the ability to see applications and control them. So you can say, all right, well, we're only allowing this version of IE to use. That's our network policy. We don't want people to be able to use Safari or Chrome or Firefox or any other version of Internet Explorer because it has vulnerabilities built into it. With network awareness, it has the ability to learn what kind of devices are on your network. It can go out and say, all right, well, these are Linux servers, so when that IIS attack comes through, yeah, it'll put an alert, but it's going to be a low priority one. You don't necessarily need to get woken up at 3 a.m. to run out and fix that. The device isn't going to be compromised. Identity awareness they have the ability to see what users are doing on your network as well and identify what devices they have logged into, who's using what, and that can tie back to what applications they're using, and not just give you an IP address and hunt down based on that. You can figure it out based on who the actual user is in Active Directory or whatever directory services you might be using. And there's going to be less false positives. There's never going to be zero false positives. It's just not ever going to happen. But the fact there's less false positives means there's less, less things for you to investigate. But again, even next-gen technologies, they do require tuning. They do require someone to look at them. You can't put them in and just forget about them. There's no device out there like that.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen a lot of clients, it's time for a hardware refresh, right? Oh, it's been 8 years or whatever since my last ASA, or 5 years, whatever it is. So they look and they're just buying a new thing. And, you're looking at whether it's Cisco with ASA with Firepower or Palo Alto or whomever, everyone's claiming next gen. And people get excited about it on the sales side, right? And every vendor is going to come at you and say, this is the monitoring tool that you need that solves all your problems. But that care and feeding part is so important. Yes, the next-gen tool sets, there are some great features and functions about them that can make a difference. But what we've seen, and Dan can speak to multiple examples, we've seen them misconfigured, incorrectly deployed. Again, I'll just bring up Target as for example. They had FireEye, and it's not to knock FireEye. They had a great tool set. It's not a firewall, I know, but just as an example, they had a great next-gen type of tool set, an anti-malware, malware detection, and it just wasn't configured to actually block. It blocked malware. It was configured to log an alert. Okay, well, it did okay in that role. It's not the tool set's fault. It's the implementer's fault. And what we've seen in a lot of, whether it's a next-gen firewall or someone that's looking to just get a new firewall in as part of that hardware refresh, they're not really thinking like, how can I take advantage of these features and how is it going to change my day-to-day process? They're just looking at it like, oh, hardware refresh, or oh, I'm sold on the next-gen features, but I'm not going to figure out at all how I'm going to use them and leverage them. So make sure that that's part of your plan. If you're going to be rolling out some new technologies, if that's on the horizon, whether it's something you recently did or next year, make sure that you have it sorted what you're going to actually do with all those new features. Even something as simple as, geo-blocking, that's a big, you could always do that, right? You could always go put in ACLs. The nice whiz-bang feature to me, from what I've seen, is it's in a nice GUI. Okay, I mean, that's important, but you could always have done that.
And to Matt's point of geolocation blocking, for some of our clients that, for an international client, geolocation blocking, it's just not feasible. But, I did work for a bank, and they wanted to enable geolocation blocking on the device we deployed. And I said, well, what do you want to allow? And he's like, United States only. That's, right there, that can help. I got obviously no guarantee that can help stop a lot of attacks. But on the same note is, if that IP address is spoofed, looks like it's coming from the United States, again, it's not going to, fully protect you.
Sure, and look, plenty of attacks originate in the U.S. anyway, right? So it's that security principle of least privilege, right? If you don't do business in Iran, why? Why even have it as an option? It's not to say that all attacks come from Iran, or Russia, or Ukraine, or China, or whatever. It's just, if you don't do business there, why even, Or if you do, that might be an area, at least from a monitoring respect, that you have some additional scrutiny, some additional, alert, that it's not just going to some distribution email box. All your alerts aren't just going to some distribution email box, and, you don't check it ever.
Yeah. So the next area we're going to talk about is layers of defense. The days of having a layer 3 firewall and antivirus solutions to protect your network are long, long, long gone. And even having what we would call the first-gen IPS, that's essentially strictly signature-based. You still need a layer 3 firewall. You still need antivirus. But you also need now the next-gen IPS, network and host-based, if you can go for it. Email and web filtering, we've talked about plenty of times, always necessary. And then NAC, network access control, wired and wireless, so it's prevent the contractor coming in and plugging into your network, or the guy that's outside war driving, if you're still using pre-shared keys trying to get into your network. And then also on the wired side, true layer 3 security, and not just segmenting, we have, segmentation with VLANs. Well, okay, traffic can still traverse there, so an attack comes in, it gets on your server network. Segmentation is nice, it helps keep things look clean and controls broadcast norms and such, but they can still traverse from your server VLAN to your user VLAN to your wherever. Have something that can actually block traffic. And I know ACLs on VLAN interfaces are not fun, believe me. But there are other solutions out there that can say when, Active Directory company employee plugs in, they get this access. Contractor plugs in, they get this limited access, and so on and so forth. And also, again, anti-malware solutions, network-based and host-based, are extremely important nowadays. And we understand having all these, yes, they would be great, but you got to figure out which ones work best for you, and you need the resources, time and resources to implement them. So planning and using of next generation tools, like we've already talked about, someone has to look at these. You can't just put them in and hope for the best. Perfect example, I did a demo with a product, went down, reviewed it earlier this week, and they got an alert about malware. And we were reviewing, and there was, I was like, this exploit kit came in, and I said, oh yeah, I got an alert about that. I was like, well, did you do anything? No. So you got to do something. You just can't put this in and walk away and hope for the best. And when an alert does come in, you need to drill down. You need to further analyze what it is, where the attack's coming to and from, what the source and destination is. Is it someone from Russia trying to get in? And you go, well, I really don't need them to get into my network and lock it down and start keeping them out.
And from the greater security program management respect, have someone formally be assigned this task. As obvious and straightforward as that sounds, again, almost every assessment we do where we ask about assigned security responsibility, it's either a shoulder shrug or a blank stare or, well, if something's in our policy, well, okay, I mean, you have a policy about it. That's the words on paper. How are you supporting that and enabling that function in your organization? So make sure someone signed up for it. And look, if you're short-staffed and you don't have the time, or you're an army of one, then I certainly feel for you. But that doesn't mean that the problem can just be kind of glossed over, right? That needs to be solved for, and that's where you might consider something like managed services or whatever. And again, there's a million options on that. That's a separate conversation altogether, but that's where, you know, when the counter to, hey, you need to be doing this, when your counter is, I don't have the time, it's still important, right? So we got to find a way, and you got to, part of that is getting buy-in from some other stakeholders and executive leadership, and they need to support that formal definition of the role and who's responsible for it.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing is, even though these next-gen tools are going to have less false positives, they still need tweaked. You know, you still need to go in and be sure, you know, certain features are working properly in these devices. So now, on-prem or off-prem solutions. You know, the on-premise, like we just talked about, you got to have someone assigned to it to review the alerts and the logs. You know, these solutions, as we've said already, they aren't set it and forget it. Now, off-prem solutions, you know, you rely on a third party to review the alerts and logs, but also it requires more, you know, you need to have appropriate funding available for them as well. So this is something that, you know, that needs to be internally decided. Obviously, we can, you know, Matt and his team can sit down and work with you guys to figure out which one of these may be the best, or there might be a combination of, you know, you might have, you know, an in-house solution that's feeding its logs to the off-prem solution. You'd say, well, you know, I don't have the time for this. Let's get, you know, this on-prem solution that does this. We'll have an off-prem solution that will take those logs in, and they can alert, you know, they can work with us to help figure out how to solve any problems that may come through. So recommended action, plan of action. You know, review what you currently have to see if it meets your needs. You know, especially with your auditors coming in, they may say, hey, you have this, you know, older device. It doesn't do what we require, you know, devices on your network to do to protect your network. You know, and if they don't meet your current needs, you know, discuss, do you want an on-prem solution or off-prem or both? And then start testing these solutions out. You know, grab multiple vendors. You know, obviously we're a Cisco shop. That's what we're going to recommend, but there's obviously more solutions out there. You know, bring in as many as you can, or, well, as many as you feel comfortable with, and then pick the one that suits your needs the best. And then train and review your company's security policy with your end users. Your end users are the ones that they need the refresher every now and then to know what your policy is, what to look out for, what to do, what not to do. You know, are they allowed to bring in stuff from home? You know, back to the USB sticks, or how can they bring work home with them securely? And be realistic of your capabilities and resources. You know, like we just said, you need to use these tools. You know, you have to have someone dedicated if it's an strictly an on-prem solution. You know, and these resources, you know, whatever you bring in, whatever solution you bring in, again, it's not going to be a silver bullet. It's not going to stop everything. All right, conclusion. You know, pretty much as we said, the next-gen solutions are required to protect your network against today's and tomorrow's threats. There's always going to be something out there, someone out there trying to get into your environment, especially being in finance. You guys are high-value targets to these guys. You know, they want to get in, steal money, wreak havoc, and just make you guys have a miserable day. Hackers are always trying to find out how to get around, you know, security devices, and some of these guys are extremely funded. They go out, they buy Cisco, Checkpoint, Palo Alto, SonicWall, FortiGate. They buy these devices, bring them in, see how they work, see how these devices defeat their malware or their IPS, you know, their attacks, and figure out how to get around them. Again, never going to be a silver bullet, never will happen. The only way to completely protect yourself from the internet is unplug yourself. That's pretty much all I have. Any questions, comments?
And nothing really came in as we were going, you know, to the audience. Again, thank you for attending, but, you know, we'll hang around for a couple minutes. If there's not any specific questions Dan has a depth of experience in terms of implementing these kinds of tool sets, albeit if you come at him with a detailed checkpoint question, I don't know if he'd be able to respond, but with a detailed answer. But just thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day. Anything, please fire away in the QA box or a chat session, and we'll be happy to respond. It's a pretty quiet group. All right, well, Anna, I think, as we kind of wrap here, if something sneaks in, we'll break. But thank you, everyone, for attending. Anna, is there anything else you want to touch on before we go?
No, I just let everybody know that if you have any other questions, you can reach out to marketing.team@corebts.com, and you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow, likely, with a link to the recording of today's webinar. So let us know if you have any questions, and on behalf of myself and all of our presenters today, we thank you for joining us and taking time to view our presentation. Have a great Thursday, everybody.
Thank you.